Anyway, we have Peter Wallison of the American Enterprise Institute. He's former White House and Treasury General Counsel. CNBC contributor Jared Bernstein of the Economic Policy Institute and author of Crunch. We have Kudlow and Company contributor Jerry Bowyer of Benchmark Financial and CNBC contributor Greg Bowyer of Stanford Financial Group. Gentlemen, welcome. So, Peter, let me begin with you. Peter Wallison, you've been through this before. We talked about regulations the other night on the program. Is this a new Sarbox? Is this any good, or is it going to lose our competitiveness? I mean, there's a million unanswered questions here. What's your first take?
Well, my first take is that the Treasury Department did a very nice job in its long-term and intermediate-term plans. These were not things that were intended to be debated right now. They were supposed to be visionary for the future, and they won't be enacted certainly during the Bush administration. But they tacked onto that, unfortunately, some powers for the Fed, which can only cause trouble for our financial system.
Run through that. Expand on that last point, because a lot of people believe, and I guess I believe, if the Fed is going to make discount window loans to the investment banks, like Goldman and formerly Bear Stearns, Morgan Stanley, and whatever, then they do have a right to at least go in there and take a look at the paper, don't they?
Absolutely. If we establish some sort of regularized system in which the investment banks have access to the discount window, of course they'll have to be heavily regulated. That's the problem. We shouldn't establish such a system. The investment banks should be able to fail like everybody else. And if we set up a system in which they are considered to be too big to fail, we will only create huge problems in our markets with the failure of moral. We'll have more moral hazard and a failure of independent control.
So, you know, the Fed's getting too much out of this. That's one of your key points. They're just getting too much, and they don't deserve it. Is that what you're basically saying?
Well, it's not that they don't deserve it. There shouldn't be such a policy. It's not a question of any agency deserving something. The question is whether it's good policy. And if you give the Fed control over the investment banks, they will stop being innovative, they will start being bureaucratic, they won't be as aggressive, and our financial system will suffer. There isn't any good reason to do this.
So, Greg Bowyer, let me bring you in here, buddy. Greg,
Hi.
As I understand it, in Washington these days, nobody fails. I mean, now, Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek tried to teach us generations ago that free market capitalism was about success, surely, but also failure. And sometimes it's the failure that's more important, because that sets the risk management barometer, Greg. But in modern-day Washington, homeowners don't fail, mortgage owners don't fail, farmers don't fail, nobody fails, including big banks. This is what I'm hearing. And the Bush administration, quite apart from Mr. Paulson's routine today, the Bushies are about to endorse the Dodd-Frank, it could be $400 billion mortgage bailout through the FHA. So nobody fails anymore, Greg. Is that the deal?
This is a watershed. We're going to look back on the last few weeks as a fundamental turning point in the way we define moral hazard and the way we look at taxpayer money going to bailouts. Now, there are going to be some dissents from you, Larry, George Will yesterday on Stephanopoulos, John McCain, but the prevailing sentiment right now is Bernanke, Paulson, Frank, and they're going to dominate on this.
So, Jared Bernstein, let me understand. You want to see, not only do you want to see nobody fail, but you want the Fed to have, let me see, at least 3 bank examiners standing behind each Wall Street trader. Is that the deal, Jared?
Larry,
and then there'll never be any failures in our life. Is that right?
Hey, Larry, if you can bail them, you can nail them. The problem here is that this horse has already left the barn. And somebody said a second ago, I thought made a great point, that you don't want to let the non-bank system get too big. Sorry, it's already occurred. 70% of American borrowing is coming from this shadow financial sector right now. These banks are clearly too big to fail. Now, as far as the Federal Reserve is concerned, if we're going to bail these folks out, then the American taxpayer absolutely has a right to look at their books. And I want to correct something that's very important. I very much support Frank Dodd. Frank Dodd does not cost $300 to $400 billion. I want our viewers to be very straight about that. That is the value of the mortgages that they may underwrite. The bill itself will probably be scored in the tens of billions. And I'm not saying that's cheap.
Right.
I'm just saying that that's what it's going to cost.
And that is the best case option, because if you are going to have, listen, let's be very clear about this. They're going to use the FHA to guarantee hundreds of billions of mortgages, and there is no reason we know that those mortgages are necessarily going to work their way out. This idea of only $20 billion liability is nonsense. It could be a $100 billion liability. Because they're going to go down anyway, Jared. The subprime mortgages are going to go down. It's silly. They're in foreclosure. This is silly, and it just stops prices from falling.
Now, you know, to the contrary, the thing I like about Frank Dodd, and I don't think it's perfect, but there's nothing perfect here. I wish we weren't here to start with. But one of the reasons
Let him fail. Let him fail. That's perfect.
What Frank Dodd does is it helps us get to the bottom of the price correction that has been so slow.
How's that going to get? Oh, no, wait a minute. That's just economics. Now, Jerry Bowyer, Jared, did you see how he did that? He did it nicely. Jared always has a nice, high-toned way of putting it.
Right.
Jared wants to repeal the law of supply and demand.
That's what he just
attempted to do, Jerry Bowyer, and I'm assuming that you're not going to stand for that. Why should the FHA do the job where the market is going to do it more efficiently and faster?
No. Yeah, they shouldn't. Look, I mean, nobody wants pain. Nobody wants the pain of foreclosure. We've known people who've gone through foreclosures. It's a very difficult process, but that's part of being an adult in a free society. That pain is a learning process. I wish we could learn without some of these problems. I wish we could learn without market clearing, but apparently we can't.
What about the Bear Stearns shareholders? Did they somehow escape this pain?
Yes.
No, are you kidding me? The Bear Stearns shareholders got reamed. I mean, these people, they barely came out with anything left. They were almost obliterated, but you're mad because they weren't completely obliterated.
I'm with you. I'm saying that there's some market discipline in action. Don't act like nobody can fail here.
But Peter Wallison, let's stay with this point. Before we go back to this regulatory, bureaucratic, lobbying maze that no human being can understand, and is really an insider's game, Peter. You know that. The regulatory bureaucracies are going at each other. Each one is backed up by certain lobbyists that are pouring money into the pockets of the Democrats and the Republicans to argue their case. It's a power trip. But let's go to this other point about success and failure. And let's go to the Frank Dodd bill, which is getting short shrift today. But I'm looking at this article over the weekend, Saturday, March 29th, Washington Post, front page story, Bush readies mortgage aid plan. Now, Peter, he told me in an interview 3 weeks ago he wouldn't go there. Now he's going there, and I want to ask, is this because the Fed and the Treasury did give Bear Stearns a little bit of a break, and because Main Street thinks what Jared just said, which is reasonable, that Bear got bailed out? Is that what this is all about, Peter Wallison?
I don't see that the Dodd-Frank bill is related to what happened with Bear Stearns. I don't think there's any reason why the administration would adopt Dodd-Frank because of that. I think that they may well be concerned about the stability of the market, and they want to put some kind of floor under mortgages. However, I don't think the Dodd-Frank plan has any chance of working.
Why not?
Well, one of the reasons
is Jared Bernstein comes on this program. Jared loves this plan. Besides his other plan, his other plan is to have three bank examiners stand behind every Wall Street trader. Second to that, his favorite thing is the Dodd-Frank bailout plan.
One of the reasons that it won't work is that there are much cheaper ways to get this done. There is an incentive on the part of the mortgage lenders to avoid foreclosure. It's very expensive for mortgage lenders to avoid foreclosure. And the reason why that isn't working particularly well is that people are walking away from their homes when they're underwater, and you can rent a house for less than you're paying to buy it when you have no interest in it. So the Dodd-Frank proposal will not solve that problem.
Go ahead, Greg Bowyer.
Larry, let me raise one other issue that came up today in terms of rewarding failure. I've been ranting all day like Kramer about this. In the Paulson proposal, he gives the Fed more authority. What agency in the last year has done the worst job? They missed the subprime crisis in August. But they're not regulating these predatory lenders. They've done a terrible job, so they get more power.
Right. See, I asked Peter Wallison this, and Peter dissed me off. He just flicked me off.
Here's the point. Wait a minute, Larry. Wait a minute, Larry.
Isn't this a great surprise? The Fed wants more power. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to hear this.
Let me say this about this whole idea of regulation. The reason the Fed did not do anything about the subprime mortgages and so forth is that all of the regulators are subject to political control. If the Fed 2 years ago had said, we're going to put a stop to this business of allowing mortgages with 1% down or allowing